Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this wonderful webinars by the Division of Research Methodology, which is a wing part of SAISA. I will just first go through, a few things before we allow our presenters to start. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending. It is important to note that the meeting will be recorded, and I guess it will also go out on YouTube and Facebook. So you are also allowed to share if you want to share. And we're hoping that you have consented as well to being recorded. The second thing would be that comments and questions can be put on the chat box. And you're allowed to raise your hand if you have any question anywhere. We would also request that you switch off your videos and sound so that there are less interruptions as the presentation goes. And as I've indicated, you can raise your hand on the options there just to ask a question whenever you have a question. And amidst of us, we have the DRM members. I've noted that we have Pakeza. We also have Mandy. I saw her joining. We also have Ms. Peters, and also I saw Dr. Nezizwa Diti. Those are the 4 people that I've seen from the DRM committee exec. So I don't know if I missed anyone. Let me then take this time to introduce you to the topic or the webinar that we will be embarking on in terms of who is presenting this afternoon. So we have Ms. Peters and also Prof. Willie. I know the two have been also on the DRM. Ms. Peters is a lecturer at the University of Venda in the Department of Psychology. Her research interests are ethics, research methodology, reproductive health, feminism, masculinity, and violence. She has taught research, methodology, ethics, counseling, and supervised BPsych students on clinical practicum and research projects. Now, Prof. Willie Chinyamurindi is a professor at the University of Fort Hare in the Department of Business Management. His research interests are around understanding dynamic capabilities with the emphasis on their impact on development themes amongst individuals, organizations, and society. He has taught at both undergraduate as well as postgraduate level subjects such as human resource management, organizational behavior, strategic management, and research methods. So the two would be taking us through an introduction to qualitative research this afternoon. I would ask that our presenter would share the screen and take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to this exciting webinar that we have planned for you from the Division of Research and Methodology for the Student Division of the Psychological Society of South Africa. My name is Fatima Peters, and today I'll be presenting on an introduction to qualitative research. This presentation will be introducing you to the webinar series as well as taking you through the history of qualitative research, some basic concepts, as well as the characteristics of qualitative research. The topics that we will be presenting in this lineup for the student division include an introduction to qualitative research by myself, how to identify a research question, what is a researchable topic by Prof. Willie. These presentations are going to be done today. Dr. Bashirati will be doing how to do a literature review. Dr. Mapura will be doing how to do qualitative sampling. Prof. Bond will do qualitative data analysis. Dr. Takalani will do a trustworthiness in qualitative research rigor. Prof. Kaji will do an introduction to mixed methods research, and I will conclude the presentation lineup by talking about referencing and paraphrasing. In this slide, I quickly want to highlight the importance of scientific inquiry and the historical relevance of it. In the 17th century, there were great strides being made in the natural sciences. In order to emulate the same growth and development, the social sciences began to use the same methods of inquiry, applying an objective stance to research and knowledge development. Philosophers increasingly became dissatisfied with the nature of inquiry and questioned the applicability of studying humans using an objective and positivist approach. In order to gain a deeper, more meaningful understanding of people's lived reality, a qualitative research approach was born. In the 20th century, qualitative research became a self-defining field of inquiry, and this led to the development of multiple paradigms or meta-theories such as interpretivism, phenomenology, critical theory, and many other theories. The research is always driven by what we as people value and want to know. The topics we choose are meaningful to us, and inherently our personal philosophies influence what we seek to know, and thus the research. A paradigm is the theoretical assumptions we make in the research process that informs the ontology, epistemology, methodology, and axiology in research. Ontology at the most basic level is defined as the way in which we see the world, the nature of reality, or what we see as the truth or how we see the world. The ontology, epistemology, methodology are all derived from the paradigm that the researcher uses. How we see the world influences how we engage in it and what we believe we can know. There are multiple realities or ontologies. I'm going to mention 3. So according to Denzin and Lincoln 2005, there's a positivist or post-positivist meta theory that uses a realist ontology. Now, a realist ontology means that you believe that there is an external reality independent of the person, and through empirical observation it can be known. A constructivist paradigm, however, has a relativist ontology, and this implies that there are multiple realities that are constructed by people. And in the third paradigm is a feminist or Marxist paradigm, which uses a material realist ontology, which states that there are material differences based on a race, class, and gender. Now, epistemology is about how can knowledge be developed, or how do we come to know what we do. Important questions about epistemology are what counts as knowledge and whose knowledge is privileged, also whose voices are silenced. Based on the 3 paradigms that are mentioned under ontology, the epistemological stance for positivism is an objective epistemology. That implies that the researchers need to have a detached or impartial stance to research. Post-positivism is similar to positivism in ontology and epistemology, but it differs in that truth is dependent on what we believe it to be. Second, that we need to always be trying to prove our research as false using the falsification method. Nothing is proven to be truth or to be right. The constructivist paradigm has a subjectivist ontology, meaning that the research and the participant co-create knowledge together, and this is done in the natural setting or in a very natural manner. The third paradigm, feminism or Marxism, has a subjectivist ontology as well. Methodology is the bridge that brings together our philosophical standpoint and our methodology. So methodology encompasses the methods that we use in our research because our methods are informed by our paradigms, which includes our ontology and our epistemology. And this links with our methodology. And this all needs to go together and be coherent. And what I normally say to students is, You wouldn't go to the North Pole or the South Pole where the temperature is minus 20 and wear a, a bikini, because that just wouldn't be logical or make sense, because you would freeze to death if you did so, right? So the methodologies that you use needs to be coherent with your research paradigm, with your ontology and epistemology. So if you were using a positivist method theory, you would probably use a quantitative research approach, and you would use research designs such as an experimental research design or quasi-experimental research design. Methods that you would also use, or tools that you would use, would be things such as a checklist or a questionnaire. So if you have a constructivist or feminist or Marxist paradigm, you would tend to use naturalistic methodological procedures, or you would more likely use a qualitative research approach. Now, using a qualitative research approach, you generally would use data collection methods such as a face-to-face interview, and you would probably tend to use things that are more uh, accessible to people, more conversational in its approach. I want to just read the definition Creswell provides for qualitative research, because it has key terms and concepts that is important to take note of when doing qualitative research. Qualitative research begins with the assumptions and the use of interpretive theoretical frameworks that inform the study of research problems addressing the meaning individuals or groups ascribe to a social or human problem. To study this problem, qualitative researchers use an emerging approach to inquiry, the collection of data in a natural setting sensitive to the people and places under study, and data analysis that is both inductive and deductive and establishes patterns or themes. The final written report or presentation includes the voices of participants, the reflexivity of the researcher, a complex description and interpretation of the problem and its contribution to the literature, or call for change. Based on the definition that Creswell provides about qualitative research, I'm going to talk about 6 of the key principles or characteristics that he mentioned. The first one being that we need to respect the meaning individuals or groups ascribe to a problem. Often the researchers go into community and they look at the problem from their vantage point as opposed to from the community's vantage point or from the individual's vantage point. So we need to be aware of how it is that we are looking at problems and how it is that we are trying to research these problems. The second characteristic or principle is that we need to do research within the natural setting. So that means that we need to do the research in the place where the problem is. So if we are exploring communities, experiences of lack of service delivery, the place that we're doing the research is within the community. So going into the community and collecting data from people within the homes would be the natural setting. The third characteristic is that we need to be sensitive to people and places. So if we're going into these communities to check service delivery, it's important that we are sensitive to people's culture, people's language, people's backgrounds. How are we presenting ourselves to people? Are we approachable? Are we speaking in the language that people can understand? So those aspects are really important to consider. The fourth characteristic or principle is that qualitative research begins to do research inductively, and you start with trying to develop categories, and you move from categories and it becomes more and more abstract. But after you've conducted the research and you have all the information, you go back and you check, can you improve? So both inductive and deductive reasoning is applicable to qualitative research. The fifth principle or characteristic is that the voices of the participants must be heard. And the sixth characteristic or principle is that the researcher needs to be reflexive in the way in which it works with people. What this means is that the researchers need to take into account their own perceptions, biases, and interpretation when they are doing research, and understand how they see the world influences how they engage in the research process, and try and understand if there are any things that they need to take into consideration for when they're doing the analysis. When you're doing research, it's important to note that it's a process where you as a researcher, you're using your own background and understanding of the problem. So that can bias one to some extent, but it's important in qualitative research to note this. The last aspect that I'd like to speak about is the axiology of research. Now, axiology refers to the researchers' values and beliefs and what the researchers believe and think is the nature of ethics when we're conducting a research. Now, when we're doing research, it's really important to use this concept of reflexivity again. Think about how are we doing the research? How is it being experienced by the people that we're doing it with? Are we being respectful and fair and understanding the love, the world experiences of the participants? And if we look at the history of psychology and the experiments that were done previously, such as Milgram's experiment, despair, Zimbardo's prison experiment, these research are problematic in the ethical component of how the research is done. So researchers really need to be careful and think about the implications of the research more than just what are they doing, how are they doing it, are everybody's voices being heard, are we being respectful, are we presenting the information in a way that's fair and reputable. So I wanted to make something on the epistemology, methodology, and axiology. So I came up with a case study. The case study reads as follows. Cindy is a 19-year-old who lives with her parents. She used to wait for her dad to come home from work, but since he was robbed and beaten a few weeks ago, he has not been working. Food is expensive and COVID has made things worse. They live in an RTP housing complex, and problems such as unemployment, poverty, drug abuse, gang, and crime are part of their daily life. When she goes to the spaza shop, she is often harassed by males on the street, but she does not respond for fear of victimization. Since leaving school, she has been looking for work, taking hard copies of her CV to the shops by the mall, but not been fortunate. Printing is expensive. The owner of the tavern told her that if she comes to work for him, he would pay her good money. But Cindy is scared for her safety, and especially around drunk males. So if we design a research study on Cindy's experiences of the job searching process, questions that we could ask are, what research paradigm would we use? What would be our ontology? What would be our epistemology? And what would be our methodology? Some of my thoughts about this case study are, as a woman, already I'm thinking, more than being harassed, I would be afraid of being raped and possibly killed coming home from the tavern in the middle of the night. But as a woman, it informs most of the ways in which we think about what we're doing. So the paradigm that I would use would probably be feminism, because I believe in women's rights. So this looking at the problem is informed by my own perspective as a woman, my own beliefs as a woman. Ontologically, I think the problem of poverty is a major problem, and not having any other source of income for Cindy other than the father's money is very difficult for the material circumstances that she lives in. Her gender, her class, her race all impact on the opportunities that she has. Epistemologically, I think, how can we know, develop knowledge? The epistemology. I would think that through discussion and engagement with Cindy and examining broader social circumstances about unemployment would be necessary in order to develop knowledge. And Cindy's subjective experiences is important for how we understand unemployment. Methodologically, I would probably use face-to-face interviews, try and make Cindy comfortable and explain to her what it is that I'm doing and how it could affect her, and obviously give her the opportunity to say no, she's not interested, or yes, she wants to participate, and to ask questions, and for the process to be open and respectful of Cindy's circumstances. Axiologically, I would go back to Cindy with the information after I'm done and discuss the information with her and ask her if there's anything else that she would like to add. Also, trying to connect Cindy to other organizations in the community that could help her with stuff such as studying and job searching skills would be really great. And as the case demonstrated, our personal perceptions really does influence how we see problems, what problems we value, what we think, how we can develop knowledge, and the philosophical ways in which we see the problems that we want to address. And we can't separate who we are from what we do. So this understanding the paradigms that influence research methods is really important, especially in qualitative research and moving forward, trying to do research better.
Okay, thank you so much for listening to my very short presentation, and Prof. Willie will continue from here.
Prof. Willie?
Yes, thanks Fatima, and thanks Angie for the facilitation. I've got a hot cup of tea in front of me, so I just don't want to burn myself as I make the transition. Let me welcome everybody to this presentation. And I am happy to be here because I'm happy to be back with the division. After a year or so apart, haven't seen some of the colleagues for the longest of time. So I am always excited, especially when I see the large turnout, and for me it testifies to the hunger that is out there concerning the use of qualitative research, and thanks for that very difficult foundational foundation that you laid, Fatima, because it's not easy to explain all those concepts of axiology and all these things that you were talking about. So for me, I'm not only grateful for that foundation that you've laid, but I think you've done well in assisting us to understand what we are trying to do. So I will tell you a little bit of my journey into qualitative research. I prefer to identify myself more as a qualitative researcher than in a field or a discipline which is predominantly dependent on quantitative methods. And strangely, my journey into qualitative research came about because of breaking away from tradition, which is often something that I think is wrong with how we teach not just psychology, but the social sciences and the disciplines that we sometimes are in. We often trap students into thinking the one best method of doing research as this method. And what then happens is that students then leave, and they have these ideas and these fears, at some case, of what qualitative research is about. And often students and colleagues want the easiest method. Tell me the easiest method so that I can get this done. And I often think that that's not the way we should be doing things. We shouldn't be driven by what is easy, but we should be driven by the idea of contribution. What is it that we want to achieve in view of some of the issues that I'm going to talk about? So I finished a master's degree in industrial psychology at Nelson Mandela University in 2007. And awesome experience, and I got a scholarship to go to Ireland and went there, and then got introduced to these things called narratives. And often part of the trap there was that I didn't want to do narratives or to use narratives as a method of inquiry. I wanted to create a model and quantitatively test it within a particular context, and then silence people with the numbers, because numbers don't lie. So my supervisor at that stage told me something and said, well, I hear you Africans are great storytellers. Why don't you embed yourself into understanding narratives? And that was quite fascinating, because I'd never thought that one would use the stories that people tell to tell stories, to tell stories, to tell experiences about that. And so that's just then the journey into narratives. I started writing a lot about narratives, and even within some of the management journals in the South African context, there's quite a lot of stuff on narratives that is now emerging from this foundational work that some colleagues and I really thought that we should be more intentional about. So I want to attempt the task that has been given to me in explaining all of this, in answering a few questions. The first question is, where do research ideas come from? Now, I thought about that, and I thought about being a high school student and being told the story of Archimedes, who one day filled up a tub to have his bath or something like that, and then as he was doing that, the tub got so full. As he got in, it started spilling over, and the term eureka, I've found it, I've discovered it, then came out of the process. I thought about that, but I also thought about sometimes the challenge that some students and colleagues go through in saying, what am I going to do? What is it that I'm going to do? So I want to share with you from my experience some of the journey I've taken in answering this question: where do research ideas come from? Ideas also come from the context that we're in, and I'm really harping on this because I think sometimes when we do research, we negate the important contribution that the context plays in informing the work that we want to do. The context is not your beautiful campus or the journey you take between the cafeteria and your office, or if you're in a rural setting, the beautiful setting that you have. I know my colleagues from University of Venda can also attest to the breath of fresh air that the context lies in the community, the people, that stretch, that divide that exists between what is happening in the university and what is happening in the community. That, for me, is every journey, an important journey that every researcher must take. If you don't know what is happening to people in the community that you live in or necessarily or work in, particularly within a university setup, then it's going to be very difficult for you to come with research that is not only meaningful, but research that is impactful. And the community part becomes important. I know when we apply for funding nowadays, they make it very clear. You need to show us if you've done any groundwork from the community in generating the ideas that you are coming up with. So ideas come from the community. Ideas come from the lived experiences and the challenges that are happening, and not only challenges, but opportunities that are there within the community. The second thought which I could bring to you, ideas are also discipline specific. Ideas are sometimes coming up with a piece of work that has been done by another scholar and say, well, I want to improve this idea, this piece of work by doing A, B, C, and D, which may be also found maybe sometimes in the suggestions for future research of that particular work, to say, I'm going to take an active and proactive approach of trying to make sure that I go and see what this person has done, critique that work, and also isolate areas of improvement where your work, and that's what we want, contribution. We don't want you to be merely reflecting what others have done, but also to be incorporating some form of an incremental knowledge-based contribution to the work that you are trying to present to us. Ideas also come from, as I said, thinking about contribution. Within the management sciences, there's an article that I force all my students to read, written by Andrew Witten, which simply is titled, What Makes a Theoretical Contribution? And in this article, I ask any student to say, what is it that we're going to get from this piece of work that you're going to do? You're going to be studying a master's, a PhD, an honors degree, and you're investing so much of your time. What is coming out of this work that you're doing? And this is then this idea and this element of contribution. If we don't think contribution, it will be very difficult then after the process. I know some people after they've done the master's, PhD, they say, okay, so what does this all mean? You've drawn the tables and shown us the graphs and the latent variables and all of these things, but what does it all mean? Objectives at the different levels of study that we're at. And for me, this is not so difficult as the first task about finding ideas. A couple of suggestions here, and I would like to start at the bottom. We need to also understand the different exit level outcomes that we're at. So if you're an honors student in psychology, there are certain level outcomes that exit outcomes that SAQA expects of your qualification. If you are a master's student and if you're doing a research master's, independent research is critical. If you're a PhD student, the idea of contribution is heightened as being critical. So I often then use this as a benchmark to say how much intensity do we put in onto a project, considering the different levels of outcomes. So for my honors students, the basic idea there is for them to be exposed to doing research independently. I let them have free reign in terms of what they can do and cannot do, but as long as it's doable and they are getting those needed experience or notion hours around doing research, independent research. For the master's student, I'm a bit tight
Willie,
with them.
Willie, I'm sorry, Angie, for just budging in. I'm not sure if you can see my hand. We are struggling to read the slides. I wonder if you can check your settings.
Oh, should I do it like this?
Yebo, thank you.
That's better.
All right. The psychologist should speak out a little bit more earlier before, but anyway, thanks, Neziswa. So understanding the exit level outcomes, what is it that is expected at the level that I'm at? If you're a PhD, it's a contribution to the body of knowledge, and that's hectic stuff. So there must be more emphasis on those areas and ideas. The nature of the study itself should tell you the type of questions that you're going to formulate. I mean, the idea, what I mean here is that there's no need to trying to do everything, which is a common characteristic. Sometimes you ask an honors student, what do you want to do? Well, I want to understand why there is violence in East London, the cause of violence in East London. I say, okay, it's a bit broad. Why don't you try and refine it a little bit, and also consider the key concepts that violence is broad. Is there a specific type of violence that you're focusing on? Is it gender-based violence? Is it intimate partner violence? Is it sibling violence? Just try and put it all and refine it so that it's doable and within the required remit at the time that you've got. And then finally, avoiding the deterministic language, not only the deterministic language, but also the deterministic positioning of certain qualitative studies, which is what this workshop is about. For instance, you can get a student who's saying, I'm working on a qualitative piece, and I would like to understand the influence of stress on employee well-being. Well, I then say to the student, the way you've also framed the question or the objective is really rooted in a type of paradigm, the paradigms that Fatima was talking about. Why don't you try and unpack it? And this is the beauty about qualitative research, because we can then unpack complexity. The current work that we are busy with right now is understanding the issue of failure in small businesses. Now, we could have said the impact of failure on performance. That's quantitative, because we clearly have an independent and a dependent variable. But we've kept it broad. We're trying to understand how entrepreneurs live through this experience of failure, particularly considering the challenges that have happened with the pandemic, the looting. And so how are you experiencing failure as an entrepreneur, and how are you navigating past that failure? I think it's not enough for us to just exhaust this hour in just looking at these things. I think we need to unpack even more in understanding the wide repertoire of qualitative methods that are there: ethnography, narrative research, your traditional semi-structured interviews. We've also used work where we've used biographies, psychobiographies. We've used work where we are using drawings, illustrative methodologies. And all of this gives us, I would like to believe, an advantage. And the advantage that we have as qualitative researchers is that we are close to understanding the real lived experiences around communities and the complexities that accompany that. And when we do that, we are actually closer to then going back to that slide of mine, the psychology of community, or the community of psychology. Thank you, and look forward to engaging with you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Willie and Ms. Peterson, for this insightful presentations. We will open now a floor for questions. You can use the chat box, or you just raise your hand. I'm not sure if I'll be able to see all the hands, but yeah, we're opening the floor now for questions and comments. I'm seeing someone, but I'm not able to. Bronewa, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question is just regarding research qualitatively. Okay, I'll just give you a background with my topic. So I'm currently researching the development of identity in Black children adopted by white parents. So my question is it relevant to gain data from both the adoptees and the parents to be able to at least have something new in the research field or research world? I don't know.
I think I would love somebody to answer this, Dr. Neziswatiti, because I think she's worked in that area. Sorry for putting you on the spotlight, Neziswa, but I think this is for you.
Hi, Roneva, and thank you, Willie. So it depends on what you want to know, but I would say, because I'm a child rights activist and I am a child-centric methodologist, I would say that if you're wanting to understand the experiences of children, then you must ask children. If you want to know the experiences of parents, then you must ask parents. But since this is about children, I would say that you need to get the voices of children to understand the experiences of children. And we have also heard both speakers that voice is very important and context is also as important. So I would say you have to figure out what it is that you want to know. But lived experiences are very, very important. I hope I answered you.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And maybe just to add on it would be that when you do interviews with a child, you would consider age. If you you must really be able to work with children, because they are a vulnerable group. That is the first thing. The second thing, there are modalities that could be used for them to express or communicate what their experiences, other than just having a formal sitting where you are asking question number 1, question number 2, question number 3. So I think you also have to have that skill. So you considering the age of the child and also the modalities that you use in that to tease out information that you would need.
On that, Fatima, maybe we really do need to have a session about this soon, about child-centric methods. Then we can, speak more on this.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other question?
This is well noted.
Okay. There is a hand.
I can't see it.
Disappeared, but her hand is up. So if your hand is up, please speak.
Happiness Ngobeni, you may go ahead and ask if you have a question there.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. So I heard the presenter touching on creating a model. So I wanted to know that are students allowed to do that, and how does one go about doing it?
Yes, you are. By all means, we are never short of models in our disciplines. How we go about it differs from discipline to discipline, but I will tell you a common method that is used in the social sciences in creating models. Particularly, this is now the quantitative side of things. So let's say we want to understand the impact of stress on well-being, particularly COVID-related stress on well-being. What we then do is we are guided by the literature in terms of the ideas that we're building. So we then build an idea that says, well, stress has the impact of lowering down energy levels. And then I say, okay, so in my model, I'm going to have stress as the variable, and I could have some variable factor that looks at physical health, supporting this idea of energy levels. And then I borrow from other literatures that might say, well, ultimately, one of the things that can lower down stress levels in any community are support mechanisms, organizational support mechanisms. And then I say, well, I've got stress, I've got health, so why don't I put a mediator or a moderator in organizational support? So already I've got 3 variables on the scale now to say these are the ones that I'm going to measure. And then the journey must be built around sufficient theorizing and leading to the model. And remember, the model does not have to be supported for you to make a contribution. I often tell students that a no finding, a hypothesis which is not supported, is also a form of a finding. So you create the model and then you test the model. And once you test the model with the results, and then you then can report on that. But usually this is the work mostly done in quantitative data analysis or with qualitative interviews, where you then have interviews, and based on the interviews, you can create a model to say, in support of these findings, here is a model, and people can go and develop this model further.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
I just wanted to mention something to the students. Whatever it is that you are going to do, take cognizance of your supervisor and what it is your supervisor is recommending. Because at the end of the day, the relationship with your supervisor is really important. And the second thing I wanted to mention was, try and take into account the amount of time that you have in order to conduct your research. If you're doing an honors, you should ideally conduct your research within that 1 year. If you're doing a master's, 2 years. If you're doing a PhD, 3 years or longer. So whatever it is that you do decide to research, make sure that you are able to do it within the time frame for the qualification that you are doing it within.
That is very important. We have 3 minutes. Do we have more questions from the students? Any more questions or comments? Any addition from the DRM members?
I just want to commend the Fatima and the team for a well-attended webinar. This has been one of the most well-attended webinars I've ever been on.
Thank you, Prof. Willie, and thanks to Fatima and the team. Any other contribution, comments from the DRM? Pageza, Mendy, Nezizwa?
I would just like to mention that we have a wonderful webinar by Prof. Kaji next week and Tuesday at 12 o'clock. All the webinars will run from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. All the webinars will run from 12 o'clock until 1 o'clock, either on a Tuesday or on a Thursday. So these are all accessible webinars. You don't have to pay for them. And we will try our best to assist students wherever it is that they feel that they need assistance with. So I'm going to, the posts are put on Facebook, LinkedIn, what's the other one? This other social media one?
Twitter and
Twitter.
Instagram.
Thank you for clarifying. You know, with all these technological things, it's not so easy to keep abreast of them. So please ask if you have other students that you know. Please give them the invitation to attend, because this is really meant to build a community of practice, not only around qualitative research, but around research methodology, qualitative, quantitative, etc. So please invite your other students, your colleagues that are doing research to attend. It would be wonderful to expand the DRM and CISA. Thank you so much for being here.
I think this is the end then. Thank you for attending, and thanks. We're looking forward to having you next week and the week after for all the webinars that we have as we share this and unpack the complexity of qualitative research. Thank you so much.